What?
Hi.
What? What did you say?
Why am I so red?
Are you
Is
blushing?
it? No.
No.
That's the thing. Like I don't understand how the light is. I'm at the Caribbean again with a
Well,
halo.
the halo. Yeah, yeah. That could be a song, eh? Halo.
There is a song called Halo.
Oh, okay. Shoot. Yeah, that's why it's a good idea. Yeah, somebody else stole my idea. No, it's probably not. You probably got all that. You're glowing because of the time you spent on the ski hill over the weekend.
I mean, those 2 seconds that it took to come down,
Well,
or maybe, or maybe the half hour that it took to go up.
that's probably what it was. It was
In minus 20. It was
yeah.
very, very cold. Yeah.
What was it? Oh, minus 20. Minus 20.
It was not minus 20, so I never know what it is. It was maybe like -2 Fahrenheit, something like that. It was pretty cold.
Oh, okay.
Very cold, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I'm trying to convert that into my scale, which is Celsius.
22 years later, I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
Now I don't know either or.
Oh, right. Because you are from Europe, right? So you would
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I have no idea
Yeah.
what's what. So it's very confusing.
Okay.
Really, really, really cold. That's, that'll do.
Like yeah, I mean temperature. Like you go out and if it's cold, it's cold. It doesn't matter what it actually says, right?
Yeah. It was kind of like my eyeballs were freezing.
Okay, that's cold.
That's cold. Yeah.
Oh, anyways, good to see you again. It's been a week, eh?
Yeah. It's been a week.
Yeah.
Listen to that Canadian accent that just came out.
Uh, oh no, I'm from Canada, eh? I remember traveling to California, trying to disguise the fact that I was from California, trying or from Canada, trying to fit in, right? And the guy right away, I order a drink, and the guy says, "Oh, what part of Canada are you from?" And I go, "How did you know?" I don't know, eh? Anyways, yeah. So, hey, how was your week? Good.
It's pretty good. Pretty
Yeah.
good. Like I was telling you, I took my kids skiing. They learned how to ski in like 2 lessons. It was pretty cool. It was intense, I
Yeah.
have to say. It was intense. It was a lot of work. But it's beautiful to see your kids pick up something new like that, and it's another activity that we can do together, right? Because I
Nice.
was really like, how is this gonna go? The two
Hmm.
kids that can't stand on their own, but they picked it up quick,
It is amazing, isn't it? How quickly kids do pick it up and adapt
Yeah.
and yeah. I remember taking our kids skiing for the first time. It was the same thing. Like I don't know whether it's because I'm higher above the ground and falling seems like it's going to hurt, and they could care less.
Yeah, it's just fun. I mean, my
Yeah.
son, especially anything fast and high speed, like
Okay.
he
Yeah.
just loves that. In fact, the first slope that we did, because they did a class, it was like a super short slope, and they're, learning how to put their legs like a pizza and um, pizza slice. And then so I take him down the first slope, and like my daughter is younger, right? And she's a little more like, oh, but she was going down really fast too. So I get him on camera for like 2 seconds because it's going so fast. I'm like, okay, I'll get her, then I'll go catch up to him and catch him.
Yeah.
Forget it. He was gone. It's all
Yeah.
the way down.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully there were no other ways that he could have gone, but like I had to have a conversation like, hey, you can't just go. It's
Yeah.
kind of like crossing the street. You gotta wait for mommy. But I was just going. It was so much fun. I'm like, no, I get it, but still.
Hi, Adina. Hi, Angela. Good to have you back on.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. You're bringing back so many fond memories. There was one time that was kind of we I had the four daughters, and it's hard to keep track. Like once they got it, they were gone constantly, right?
Mm.
And so we're going up the ski lift, and I look down and I said to my wife, I says, "Oh, look, there's the ski patrol, coming down. They must have somebody, right?" Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is that? Yeah, it is. Oh my God. It's like, okay, so it was up, it's like we couldn't get off fast enough, right? It
Adina,
was
that
minor.
was me. It
It was
was
a minor
Adina.
thing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. It
That's,
was yeah. Yeah. I
that's so
wasn't gonna
fun.
mention any names, Adina, but
Yeah, it's
yeah.
I mean it's like where do you start? I'm like, what would I start if I could have if he wasn't at the bottom,
Yeah.
how am I gonna go look for him? Where?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so we had to have little conversation. I'm like, buddy, I know you feel very confident and I know you can do this.
Yeah.
And I
And
need
yeah.
to know where you are because going back up is not as simple as like turning around and going back. Like I have to take a whole left, need to know which left. I mean, again, thankfully it was just one way up and down
Yeah.
from that specific point, but
Yeah.
eventually it won't be just one way.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
start learning this piece of, let's get him this piece of knowledge.
Well, I love I love watching my grandkids. I love watching my kids, keep learning and growing. Um, to me, it's just a testament that I'm going to talk about labels today, but the label of being old and untrainable and unteachable, kind of a thing, right? Um, you know, eh, that is just a label, and we could, sure, we're not as bouncy. At least, I still have. I'm not as flexible and all that other kind of stuff. But man, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to learn about everything and experience different things, right? Um, I've had um, I've had a daughter and a son-in-law do bungee jumping, kind of a thing, and it's like whoa, that kind of stuff, right? A friend that did parachuting. I don't know, those things kind of scare you, kind of a thing. But
I skydived. You're talking to someone who skydived five
you did
times in her life.
really? Oh my goodness!
It was amazing, actually. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life.
Wow,
Yeah,
eh?
yeah.
Wow. Did you do that in? How long ago was that?
I was the first time was 14 years ago. It
Oh,
was
it's not really
over
that long ago. Yeah, not that
mm,
long ago.
yeah, but
I
I did
don't
it
think
for 5
13 years.
years in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Boy, oh boy. Okay, we're gonna have coffee.
We're gonna have to talk about this. It was, there's a whole story why I did it, and it's we can get into it one of these days.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was incredibly powerful experience. The first step, the first time was scary as hell, but you have someone like push, with you,
To push you.
attached to you. I mean, they're literally pushing you off an airplane. So it's like, oh, if I had to take this step on my own, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But there's someone behind you, and they just jump, and you're
Yeah.
jumping with them.
Yeah.
But then there's that first moment of fear, and now you're just free falling for a while, and it's just I think the second time I probably enjoyed it a little bit more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then and then the parachute opens and it's kind of rough. And then it's like peace and quiet and just floating in the air. It's
Wow.
amazing. It's really
Wow.
amazing. It's a
Well,
remarkable experience.
I see another show coming up, like conquering fears or taking risks or any of
Yeah,
those. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. 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 Well, should we talk about labels?
sure. Let's talk about
Okay.
labels.
Okay.
I mean, we can talk about labels and the power of words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is so much in it because I was having a couple of conversations this morning, um, and and we get trapped in words, don't we? Like certain words because we have different perspectives, we think that that word means the same thing for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we you run on that belief that, oh, they must mean this, and then all of a sudden you find out, no, that wasn't what I meant.
It's what you're reading into it, right?
Oh, this week's supposed to be my failure week, and
Oh,
yeah, I'm supposed to fail
so
100 times.
100 times in 1 week. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Can you purposely fail or?
Well, I'm trying to,
Okay.
but I mean, but it was sort of like, it depends what you call failure, right? And in this one area, I took a word that I thought meant the same thing for this other person, and went down a path, and 2 minutes later I came back, and sort of reconnected, and it was like, no, that's not what I meant. Oh, okay. It's like, okay, let me get some clarification then. Like, so what do you mean? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that, from a coaching perspective, everybody, I think, can be more coach like in that. When you hear something, a label or whatever, is to be curious about, okay, so I hear you say that, help me understand what exactly you mean by that. And I know we've talked about this in other conversations, but this one, I was coaching a gentleman this morning about boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I have a definition of what that means and feels for me, and it was curious to see his explanation or what he meant by boundaries. Kind of. So yeah, so it's those kind of labels are important to find out more.
I mean, like what labels are words, right? And words are used to describe an object, a situation, a feeling, right? They can be used in so many different ways. They're filled with meaning, though, right? And oftentimes, to your point, that meaning is what you read into it, right?
Hmm.
Or what you're conditioned to think, or like the
On both
condition.
sides.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like what kind of perception do you have of that specific label? Because sometimes you could have a different name for the same thing, and the way you perceive and experience that thing is completely different based on what you call it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not so much meaning and conditioning and perception attached to this other different label, right? I actually encountered that in a coaching session. I think I mentioned it last week around, massive action, massive action, massive action, to describe, taking action. And the moment that that label massive was removed, the person was able to not scare herself as much, right? Because it was just scaring the living hell out of her to keep saying that to herself. And the moment that that label massive was removed, her attitude towards all these actions that she had to take changed too. Her fear level went down, right? So it really was around how she was perceiving that word, what kind of weight she gave that word,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And probably what it represented for her.
Yeah.
And the same is true for so many other things. So many other things. I think I mentioned something to you about this book that I was reading and the research that was done, and it was on the different ways that uh, people refer to DMT, like whether it's like referred to as a psychedelic or a spirit molecule,
Oh, right.
or a drug, right?
Yeah.
And so they did a research where when they administered it to people, giving it a different label, right? So based on how people perceived it, based on that label, their experience of it was different because of the
Interesting.
way they perceived it.
Yeah.
It
So
was
what
very,
what
very
is
interesting.
what was the acronym? DTM, or did you say?
DMT,
Okay, what is
dimet-
DMT?
dimethyltryptamine.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay. Yeah.
dimethyltryptamine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so and it's obviously a psychedelic skin. can give you a psychedelic experience. And based on what if they called it a drug, then the person experienced it as a drug. They called it a psychedelic. They tended to have more like hallucinations and stuff like that. They called it like I forget all the labels that he
Yes.
gave,
Yeah.
but there were like some were more scientific, some were more spiritual. And the experience of the group that, experienced this was very consistent with the labeling because the
Isn't that
experience
interesting?
started with that perception, like those psychedelics have how you perceive it, like your mental state really changes the way you experience them. So the label also changed the people's experiences of it. And the same is true in all things, right? This is a specific research that was done, but it really speaks to the power of language, of
Hmm.
labels, and in the meaning around those labels, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
In describing sometimes the same exact thing or object, right? It's just the label may change, and so does the perception of this, of how it's being seen, and right.
and that's what I like about what you're telling me about this experiment that was run, because it set up the experience. It set up the experience, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
And so when I hear that, and when I hear other labels being attached to, whatever we they're good for describing, and separating, like if I had two cans, and I didn't know what was in it, it would probably be a good idea that I'd label it in some way, so I know. But and then yeah, if it's a can of beans, then when I open it, I should have a can of beans in there, right? But with labels that we put on people, for instance, we set ourselves up for the experience to come. And and sometimes it happens, and then we validate the label. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and I've had it even in my own experience, have dismissed the fact that it didn't happen, saying, well, it's just a one-off, kind
Hmm.
of a thing, right? um, but it's so, when I started to realize how limiting the label became to my experience of an individual or experience of an event would happen, um, I started to really drop the labels for what they were, and try to be more open to other possibilities. Because as soon as you slap something onto somebody or something, it becomes that, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I gave this example on the show about the current mayor of New York City and how
Right.
I took that label of him being an ex police officer, and just gave it
Yeah.
meaning, what it meant for me and what it meant to have that kind of person being the mayor, associated him with Giuliani, and they couldn't be any different from each other, turns out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the initial reading and the initial meaning that I gave it to, based on that label, was associated with an experience, right? Immediately, without really even knowing much about him or doing much research about him. I
Yeah.
immediately took the label and like gave it meaning, right?
Yeah.
And so it can be very helpful, like you're saying, in like really being able to communicate with each other and understanding there's beans in this can, right?
Yeah.
Or this is what the person does, but it can also be very limiting, right? Words can be very limiting sometimes in defining and confining someone within it, right?
Well, and then especially when you latch onto it and believe it to be true, right? It's sort of like, when I was explaining about when you go up your ladder of preference, and perception, you know, you form a belief system on that label. Like that label becomes your belief system.
Yeah.
And so, like, we and then we change our the way we interact based on that. So if if you fell into the trap of the first perception you had about, oh, he's a police officer, he's this and this, going into the room, again, you're expecting something different, and so you're reacting to it differently. You're showing up differently rather than, because you're taking something with you into it. It's much like, I know, I used to do a few investigations when things went wrong in the medical field, right? So, like, some procedure didn't work out, and they were trying to get down to the root causes and things like that. A lot of times, and innocently, I mean, we all sort of get into this trap. When they see a person's name on the report, they right away go into, oh, I know this person. And then
Mm-hmm.
they slap a label on it, and they said, this is probably what happened, all this kind of stuff, right? And again, when you're doing investigations, and any good investigator would tell you, you have to take the biases away from it. You have to get to what are the facts as they are, not as you might perceive them to be based on the label or the identification that you've placed on somebody.
And that's sometimes tough to do, right? I mean, it does take this awareness of understanding how labels work, and that they're not just a descriptive word. They not only describe something or a situation, they also
Yeah.
have this direct connection with feelings, experiences, perceptions, beliefs, right? So they
Yeah.
can be very, very, very powerful.
Oh,
And
100%. Yeah.
and so, in the same way, what is really, really powerful is the way you label yourself, right?
Mm,
The way you speak to yourself, or the way you see yourself, right? Because we tend to label ourselves too, right? Well, I'm not a good sleeper, right? I'm not, I'm not a good singer, right? When you label yourself like that, eh, those are all beliefs that you're reinforcing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So really, it's important to pay attention to what the label is describing, but also like check in with yourself. What is the meaning that I'm attaching to it? What is the conditioning around this word, right? And there are a few words I would say, like the word God can be triggering to some people,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
The word actually turns out the word universe is triggering to some people. I can't remember where I was having a conversation with someone who's like, the universe. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, and there are people that are going to feel the same way about the word God, or about, any other, like big word that has a lot of meaning and a lot of conditioning and a lot of history attached to it.
Well, even I found out, I discovered the other day, like the word trigger, for instance, is another one that evokes different feelings and different ideas around what a trigger is, or kind of a thing, right? And depending on your experience, um, and resilience, when we turn certain words into buzzwords, or words that are so commonly used everywhere,
Manifest.
they tend to lose their meaning.
And manifested this, I manifested that, and this person actually brought all that up too, like in the universe and manifestation. Right? I was
Yeah.
obviously very triggered by this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Triggered.
Yeah.
Um,
Triggered.
triggered. But so then there's like, well, what about this is
Yeah.
triggering you? It's not the word universe. It's like, what is it about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So again, another opportunity when you feel triggered by a word, or like you are going down a negative connotation of the word, it's a good opportunity to look at, well, what is this really pointing to?
Well,
Like you do.
yeah. Oh, well, and it has a feeling to it. It
Hmm.
has an actual feeling to it, right? And I'll go back to my barometer. You know, if you're slapping a label on it and it's got a really ucky feeling to it, I would question that label. You know, I don't, it's probably not true, right? There's something about that, and that's whether you are, um, you know, for another person or for yourself, particularly for yourself. You know, if we could, I mean, just think. I mean, you know, we've got a few people on here and probably watching the recording. Um, what if you dropped the label? What then? What then? What would be next for you if you dropped the label? I don't care what label you're talking about, you know, or thinking about, right? Because when I look at the phrase "I am blank," it is whatever you want to fill in there. I am is. So when you drop that, what are you left with? For me, it points to the real essence of who you are. Right? You are the thinker. You are the creator. You're the label maker. You know, whatever you want to,
We
you know,
created them.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So when you drop the label, you're really left with you, because anything else is just a construct.
Yeah. You know what this reminded me of actually
What's that?
in Vishen's book, the Code of the Extraordinary Mind, where he talks about this indigenous tribe that couldn't see the color blue
Oh
because
yes.
the color blue wasn't a label they used, it wasn't a word they used. So
No.
they couldn't see the color. They
Yeah.
literally couldn't
Yeah.
see the color blue.
Yeah.
It's actually fascinating. Like I forget how the whole research was, but it was about they never saw the color blue
They never.
because
No.
they.
They. I remember that they gave them a color wheel
Hmm.
with all different shades of blue in it, and they couldn't see the subtle differences in the colors. They couldn't see. To them, it was all one thing. But
Hmm.
you throw a little bit something green in there, and they picked it up right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it and you just gave me some goosebumps about that, because if it points to the fact, if we didn't have that label there, would you really see yourself as as not enough, or as a failure, or as anything, right? You wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know blue.
And you know what? The reverse of that is like if there is something that you really truly want to see in yourself, label it in a way that you want to see.
That empowers it.
You want
Yeah.
it to empower you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or change that label that feels disempowering to one that feels more empowering. In the case of this person that was coaching, massive action,
Hmm.
like like I forget what we ended up with, but it was more like effective action, or
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was something like that. And it completely changed her relationship to this process that she had to go through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was just a question of changing the label or dropping the label, right? It had, you know,
Do you
and
have a problem with the universal manifestation? Give it a name that you don't have a problem
well,
with.
yeah. I mean, even the Tao, which was written like 2,000 years before the Bible, you know, talks about, you know, that which cannot be labeled. Like it's something behind the label, right? It's something behind the word that we have no real inkling about, right? I mean, quantum physics is trying to figure it out. Neuroscientists are trying to figure it out. I mean, neuroscientists, you know, they can pinpoint, you know, that certain aspects or certain parts of the brain can control the left side and the right side, and they can find your smelling sense, you know, and they could cut it off, you know, and they can do all sorts of different things. The one thing they can't find is consciousness.
Yep.
They can't find it. They have no idea where it is, you know, kind of a thing. So, which is intrigues me, right? Because so what is it, right? And for me, you know, again, it's a label, but I mean, consciousness is a label, but it just points to the I in the I am statement,
Yeah.
right?
it's that
Yeah.
invisible thing that we can't touch, and we like we feel like we have no proof of it because we can't touch it, and
We
yet
can't touch it.
is what's witnessing this whole thing, right?
It's what's witnessing it and what's experiencing it, right? Because you get the
Yeah.
sense of it's I who am experiencing it, right? So whatever comes after that, we're really a, the observer of that. So when we put a label on something and we act accordingly to that, we're just watching that, but we think that that's our real reality. And this is where I love Carl Jung's work, and I still like personality profiling and things like that. I really like that kind of work because all it really is labeling the conditioned self, really, because it has nothing to do with the real who you are. And his work has been misunderstood to for a lot of people because they've taken his work as defining who they are. Well, I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. I'm a deep thinker. Oh, I can't sit still. I'm a creative, kind of a thing. And people have defined themselves by that, which really just says, okay, I'm that and nothing else. But you're so much more. And he said in his early work, you are all that and more. We just keep talking ourselves away from all the other things. Like when you say, I'm not a singer. Okay, so you're now acting and removing yourself from the fact that I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to put myself into singing situations. I'm not going to sing in the car or whatever kind of a thing.
Or also that I can never be, right? That I can never
Never
be a
be.
singer.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
once you label yourself, labels limit.
Yeah.
Labels describe, but they also limit you. So
Absolutely.
in the same way that you can just change the label to make it fit, to make it more empowering for yourself,
Yeah.
frankly, you can also like kind of decide, I don't want to fit in this label anymore, right?
No. Well, it's limiting. You
It's
notice it. You notice it, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
It,
that's what limiting beliefs are. You have labeled yourself to be in a certain way, or your circumstances to be in a certain way. And there's this sense that that's just the way it is. And it
yeah.
cannot be changed. But that couldn't be further from the truth either. You can change
100%.
anything, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And and so in his work, like he kind of put put it into categories, right? Because there are demonstrated behaviors, conditioned demonstrated behaviors that we all have. But what he said was, yes, there are introverts and there are extroverts, but if you notice, it's a line that goes back and forth. So there are times when you're probably acting like an introvert, when you're quiet and reserved, and there are probably times when you're acting like an extrovert, right? So it doesn't mean that you're either one or the other, but you're acting accordingly to the situation that's in front of you. What gets in the way of the whole defining piece is that when you define yourself as one side or the other, it limits the experience of going to that side. So if I always went about saying, I'm an introvert, I'm quiet, I'm shy, all those things, and somebody came up to me and said, "Look, I'd love for you to do this presentation," I would go, "I can't. No, I don't speak in front of people. Public speaking, there was a Seinfeld. Sorry, there's a Seinfeld episode where Jerry talks about um, the two top fears is public speaking and dying. And dying came second. So you're far better off to be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
That's really funny, actually. Yeah, I mean, labels are super, super powerful and very limiting too, right?
Yeah,
They just have this they just, their labels are a command to your brain. right? The moment that especially labels towards ourselves, the moment that I label myself a certain thing, I give this command to my brain, my reticular activating system, to fit
Hmm.
in that, to
Yeah.
fit in to that label, in that story,
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
limitation.
And then you fill it up with evidence to support the label.
Exactly. And so I never try to sing. So I never see myself doing that. So I never
Yeah.
push myself to even try, right?
Yeah.
So it's really like a label is can be like really helpful, but it can also be extremely limiting if you
So
let
can
it
I
be.
ask? Let me ask you a question. I'm gonna be. Um,
Don't ask me to sing.
no, 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 no. Although I do have a couple of guitars back here, so. Um, but uh, so I guess this is almost a two-parter. Like, okay, so what makes us hang on to our labels? And in your experience, how do we get rid of them?
What makes us hang on to our labels is what makes us hang on to all our dysfunctions and all the things that don't nurture us and don't empower us, right? It's habit,
Mm,
right? It's what we know. It's like, I've labeled this, let me put it away. I don't have to think about it anymore. I have a
okay.
label for it, let me use it. I think it's part of the way the brain is efficient, right? We use language. Language is the most efficient tool that we have, right?
And
If
the
you had
most
to
misunderstood, but
the
yes,
most misunderstood and also really, really powerful tool that we have, more powerful than we think in these ways that we're discussing now, not just in terms of being able to communicate with each other, but also the meaning that
yeah,
these words have for us and what they kind of create within us, right?
yeah,
So why are they so difficult to, like to change is because we are habitual beings, right? And that's what it means. And we don't really sit with it and question it. We just run the program,
yeah.
right? And
It's just
how do
easy.
yeah, and how do you change it? You change it by rewiring your brain to think differently about that specific thing. You
So
know,
is it really about ripping the label off or slapping a new one on?
that's a very good question. I think once you decide what you want it to mean, you can slap a different label on. Yeah, yeah,
I I'm leaning towards that because it's much like, it's like replacing thought, right? It's like you really can't do that. But but I know you can set a different direction, right?
yeah. I mean,
You can
you cannot remove the word universe.
no.
You cannot use it. It's
Yeah.
still going to be out there, right? And
Yeah.
still going to mean something to
Yeah.
other
It's like
people.
gravity. I can call gravity something different, but it's still going to be gravity.
It's still going to be gravity, but I can define it in a way that feels different for me, right?
And I can play with it too, right? I when I understand it more, I can start playing with it. It's like if I didn't understand gravity, flight wouldn't exist. So people that understood gravity were able to play with it. If they came away with the belief that all objects will just eventually fall to Earth, and there's nothing that we can do, but there's birds flying all over the place, so that can't be necessarily true either. There has to be a way, right?
Right.
Right. So I think when we point ourselves or bring our attention to some place, and this is where I I think one of the most difficult questions that most of my clients have is, what do you really want?
Mm-hmm.
What do you really want? Now, and it's not it's beyond the $1 million and the yacht and then big house, right? It's like, what do you really want? And and when you start there, and this is where Carl Jung talks about, you know, if you have no labels to play with, in other words, you are I am, you get to be I am in any moment of time that's appropriate to where you're going, because there are no limits anymore. There are no limits. So if you're pointing yourself, say, north, and the next step looks like, oh geez, I guess I might have to sing. you know I don't, who knows what, but I mean, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've never done that before. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It just means you haven't done it before.
Doesn't mean that you can't do it,
And of
right?
course, it doesn't mean it you can't do
Yeah.
it, right? So just because you have a feeling about something doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do that, right? So why couldn't you put a label on I am a singer? It doesn't say I am a good singer or a bad singer. That's all ego stuff, right? It's like,
Nice one. Yeah, I can see that. And, I think you can also work on changing your perceptions of the word. It's a longer way around it,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's long, it's a little bit deeper work. But I think the immediate action that you can take when you're triggered or like you feel disempowered by a word is by defining it in a different way,
Yeah.
or really working on why that specific word has so much attached to it for you. We can also take it that way, right? It just can trigger different kind of work.
Yeah.
I don't think there's right or wrong. I think
No,
just the awareness of
that's the
how
key.
powerful labels are is where, like, is the biggest.
Well,
Uh,
as soon as you are aware of that thought or that label, it diminishes the power of it almost immediately. Like you
yeah,
see a shift in
yeah.
it, right? So I'm curious though, anybody that's on or in recording, like if you got any questions or anything regarding your experience about labels, limiting or otherwise, please share with us. We're always looking for comments or others' experiences. Because we talked about this before. This is so cool that there's two of us here, right? And next week we're gonna have three,
We're
just
gonna
because
have three.
we're
Yeah,
gonna have
we're
three.
gonna have three.
Um,
I mean, I can speak to like one label that was triggering for me a little bit
sure,
was single mom, and
single
I
mom,
was like, it felt so limiting to me. Not because I'm not a single mom, I'm still a single mom, but I'm also a woman,
yeah,
right? I'm also a friend. I'm
yeah,
also an entrepreneur. I'm also
yeah,
a coach. I'm also a
yeah.
designer, right? But for some reason, whatever, like I referred to myself as a single mom, it felt very limiting. Felt like
Mm,
I'm just a single mom. I'm just labeled this. Or like,
yeah.
when you get divorced or like now I'm divorced,
You're a
right?
divorced
And
single mom.
divorce, I mean, I'm not yet, but like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just saying just the word divorce has so much attached to it, so much frankly conditioning of, there's so much perception around that person has failed at something. And
mm,
if you it doesn't mean that I'm not going through a divorce, but I'm not allowing that perception of failure that's
yeah,
attached to affect me,
yeah.
because I see it as a label, and I'm not just someone who's going through a divorce or just a single mom. All of those things. And
Yeah,
all of those things are powerful, right? I am a woman, I'm a mother, I am a single mother, I am going through a divorce, and I was a widow at some point, and I'm a daughter, right? And I'm
yeah,
a friend,
yeah.
right? And I am a designer, and I am a coach, right?
And you're a co-host of a show. You're all
And
these
I'm a
things.
good co-host of a show. There you go. I have a new label. And it's, yeah, you can very easily fall into sticking yourself into that label and staying in the confines of it. I'm a single mom, right? There's no hope for me. I'm struggle is attached to that often, right? I have failed at my marriage or relationship is attached to that, like hardship is attached to that. And I felt really triggered because I was like, yes, I am a single mother, but I don't see struggle. I see challenges, but I don't see myself as a struggling person that, yeah, I've had hardships and I do go through that. Doesn't define who I am. I'm not
No,
struggle and I'm not
no,
hardship, right?
yeah,
I really had to think about that one, like consciously, right?
yeah,
Like really intently, and like really look at what is it that's triggering me. Well, I realized what was triggering me was all these other meanings that I saw attached to it. And the moment that I saw, I was like, no, but wait, I'm also this, 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 and this. That meaning just dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads up to what Adina was shared here, is that, she said, I used to put a lot of labels on myself. And, y- I think that's natural. Like, it's just natural, right? It's what we attach to those labels that is far important. And recently been writing I am statements every morning. And that's an also great tool, because you start to get more, realize that you are more than just, right. And it helps her feel better. And it can't not help you feel better, right. um but I'll tell you this: you're even far more than what you could ever think of. You are far more than whatever you can think of, because the best you can do is go back into your memory and reframe those as labels, right. Because you're going back to, right. So, and we're gonna, like the letter blue, or the color blue, right. If it's never come under your radar, you would never know.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, right. So all
Yeah.
of a sudden, you know and I have a bit of a story around singing that way too. Is, like, I've always had a musical instrument in my hand since I was 13. And the opportunity came up, one time. A friend of mine came up to me and says, have you ever thought of doing some singing? And I never considered myself a singer. I sang in the closet. you know Rarely did it in public, and very self-conscious about it. But you know what? Again, the realm of possibility. Why not? Why not explore that? So for 2 years, I played a role of Elwood Blues, and we had this Blues Brothers routine going for a couple of years, when we would travel around and do this thing. And I had a blast. I'm not saying I was any good at it, but I had a blast doing it, right? But I would never have done it if I've stuck to my labels.
You would have
Just
missed out on the experience.
I would have missed out on it, right? So even though we can come up with, really good descriptions of things that, thanks, Adina, that we have done, just think of other things, the blank piece, and be open to filling it up with other possibilities as you expand your consciousness and awareness. Because, when you point yourself in a direction, it's what's fresh and new that comes to you is going to make the difference moving forward. Those are the insights that you have. So, well, our brains are good at step by step by step. Insights are leaps,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Yeah, they're the serendipitous moments, that what I call the little mini miracles. Like, you get an insight, and then all of a sudden, okay, the universe, whatever you want to call it, kind of, providence takes over, and things start to sync together, right? You start to notice certain people, and you go, oh, I should talk to that person, or I should, and that's how I met this lady this morning, on that, right? Moving forward with my impossible project that seems to be getting, now Ron Howard is coming into the picture. So I don't know how this.
That's so funny. It's so funny.
I know it is, but if I'm writing a screenplay. I've never had that label before, kind of a thing, right? So, or even a book. I've never written a book. So does that not make me? Does that say I can't write a book?
I mean, writing a book in and of itself, you sit down and write. It's all the meaning that you're giving it to. Again, the
Yeah,
meaning of what
yeah,
writing a book and what, am I going to do it right? How is it going to be perceived? How is it going to be taken?
yeah,
And it
right.
goes back to this concept of, you know what? Yes, labels are limiting, and labels can also empower you.
Sure.
So, going back to what Adina was saying, all the I am statements, you can really use labels to your advantage if you use them in a way that empower you.
Yep.
right? I
Yep.
am a powerful coach. I am here to have an impact,
On
right?
the
If you
yep.
use them in a way that empower you,
Yep.
eventually your brain believes that. And guess what? The reticular activating system works towards that goal. You're filling the cup that serves you versus the cup that keeps you limited in the confines of that label that you see as limiting,
The
right?
can the can has always been empty. It's always been empty. We think it's full of stuff, right? But it's always been empty, waiting to be filled with new experiences and new IMs and 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 to live life.
New labels, new empowering labels.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Can't really get rid of labels, right? We've established that our society functions on speech
Well, okay. So where do you live?
and
Well,
word.
I live someplace in a place called. Well, I'm not even sure. It's someplace in the world. Can you narrow that down a bit?
Yeah, yeah,
We
they're
need
very
to.
useful. They're very
Yeah,
useful.
it is very useful. Yeah,
And at the same time, again, you have control over how they make you feel in the way you use them, in the way
yeah,
you allow them to really like steer your perception and your judgment and your view of
yeah.
what they're describing. They're really just descriptions. You are in charge of the meaning that you give it.
And that is this. That is it right there. Right. That is it right there. And I know we don't really have a lot of time, but I mean, there's one manual that I kind of I'm up against, but I mean, it's there for a reason, and that's it's called the DSM-5, which is a diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders,
Mm.
and it's a book of labels, right? So it's it's it takes a bunch of descriptions of behaviors and puts them into a classification and then calls it a adds a label to it. So, you know, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. And the people that put this together, like there's a committee of people that put this together, are doing it for people's well-being. The problem that gets in the way of that is that, when people are given that diagnosis, it takes away any other opportunity for being something else, and because they'll get trapped into it. Oh, I've got post-traumatic stress. Oh, I'm depressed. I'm, and all these kind of things. And well, why are you depressed? Well, I have depressive thoughts and all this other kind of stuff. Well, I know lots of people that have depressive thoughts, but they don't have that label on them, right? And so, I mean, that's probably open for another topic at some time. But and some of my clients, because of that label, have considered themselves broken, that they're going to have to live and work with that. And now they're finding, after some sessions, that that's not necessarily true, that the labels are dropping away and they're starting to see, well, oh, there's more of me than these labels. I don't have to define my life by that label. And yes, there are times when I have a depressive thought, but that doesn't mean that I'm, quote, right. It's just that at that moment you happen to be having a depressive thought. So yeah,
And so often that those labels that are sometimes given to us, like you gave the perfect example there, like a mental disorder, even like a physical illness,
yeah,
are given to us. And because it's maybe a doctor that gives it to you, now you take it and that becomes who you are,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I am a sick person, or like I am, like I have bad knees, or like whatever you have bad teeth or bad vision, whatever you want to call it, right? And you accept it.
yeah,
You accept it. It's like, well, that's just how it is. And you know what? There's plenty of research that has proven that once the person's belief changes, also the condition changes, right? The physical and health condition. I mean, there's so much research around the placebo effect,
oh
right?
yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually that reminds me that one of the books that's next on my list is The Placebo Effect from
Mm,
Joe Dispenza. It's a
yeah.
really big book, but yeah, I'm eager to read it because the mind is such a powerful tool that we have. It's just that we habitually use it in the wrong way, right? We
Or
habitually just like let it run us instead of
yes,
running
instead of
it the way we want to,
absolutely. Yeah. It's a tool that can be used for good or bad,
for
right?
good or bad.
For good or bad. And once we realize that we're the ones that slap the label on, right? Then it's like, oh, you mean I can change the label? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Right?
You have the control in your hands. You just put it on auto, in an automated
Yeah.
program, right?
Yeah.
That's just run. It's on autopilot. You
Yeah.
don't have to run it on autopilot.
No.
You're actually the one controlling it, and you can steer it and put it on autopilot in a direction that you want to go.
It might mean though that you might have to pay attention to
And I
know.
mean that, yeah, you have to do a lot of work to change
Yeah.
the trajectory, right? Or a
Well,
little bit of work, right?
I
Just
yeah.
persistence and consistency, right? It's just that awareness of knowing that
Yes.
yes, you do have the control. And
Yeah.
that's not what we're conditioned to believe about ourselves in our brains. We were conditioned to believe that we're born in a certain way, that we're meant to be in a certain way, that we're limited by our physical, makeup or our genes or like where we come from,
Yeah.
right? I was born in a poor family, so I'm going to always be poor.
Yeah.
I was born with like, I don't know, my legs were crooked, so now they're going to be crooked for the rest of my life, right? My mom had this disease, so I'm going to get this disease. There's so much that we were born to believe about ourselves, conditioned to believe, that we just stopped questioning it at some point, right?
I
Those labels became us.
I came across this young lady. I've got to um her name's Clara Woods. Clara Woods. Anybody that's on and listening or should look her up. This lady is just she's 15 years old. Um, she was I don't have her site in front of me or whatever, but she was born unable to speak, had a had almost like a spina bifida type of thing, like a very degenerate of um, thing happened.
Degenerative.
Yeah, and very when you look at it, you go, man, talk about being put in limits, like all these different things, right? Um, Even though she cannot speak, she understands three different languages. For me, it's remarkable in itself, right? Um, but she's a designer. She designs sneakers. She has a sneakers line. She's also an artist, and she's had was awarded a show at a really prestigious art gallery, and they gave her a 5-star. Like they gave her an entourage, like security people, guards, limousine service, all this kind of stuff. And there's a bit of a Instagram video of it, and that's what got my attention. I go, it's like, who is this smiling, energetic girl that has this funny little walk? And I got to know more about her, and she's also a model, you know. But if she bought into the fact that all that other stuff would get in the way, like from watching her, like I have no um, reason to hold on to any limiting beliefs. Like like what excuse do I have, right? It's that kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, and also like it's to me that's like proof of how she can speak and express herself in that way. Look at all these different ways that she found to express herself,
Yeah,
creative ways, right?
yeah.
To really speak, but in a different language, right?
Here's it's that's her name, Clara Woods. Yeah, just a remarkable story, So I've been following her, and she's now following me, and so it's kind of neat to see her how she's expressing herself and allowing that to happen. And I'm almost certain none of all of that has been planned, but she's gone for the ride. And I think that's what ultimately happens when we drop those labels, is that you start to get into the flow of life and actually see what really is in front of you, like see what's waiting for you.
You start going with the waves instead of against them.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. um so we have a guest coming next week. I'm so excited. What about you?
I'm super excited. I love her. Like I had a conversation with her today. I'm
Yeah,
very, very excited.
yeah.
I don't know if you want to spill the beans or you want to make it a surprise, but
Well, no, well, I think people can start to sort of look her up and things like that. Actually, I probably should. I'll just put her name in up in here, and you can um, s- save and then show. Okay, um, so Joanne's going to come on our show next week. It's kind of our kind of Valentine's Day special, so to speak. I met her in a workshop, um, and I just knew that this was the person, and so I reached out to her, and she's a coach. She's a love coach and relationship coach, kind of a thing. She has a remarkable uh, bio and history, and um, and I'm looking forward to having a kind of a conversation. We have no idea where we're going to go with it. I think we're going to start
this,
with
yeah.
hello, how are you, and then then go.
I mean, I already have so many questions. I kind of already know where I'm going to go with it.
Ah, okay.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, I think she's a remarkable person. I met her. She's wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to bringing her on here and having a conversation about something really, really important to all of us, right? Relationships. That's
yeah,
what human beings are all about, right? We're social beings.
yeah,
Relationships are like such vital part of our lives, and yet so challenging to navigate sometimes, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
To
going
get
to be
along
really
with
nice.
people. Whoa.
I know. And it's going to be good to have someone to ask questions to versus
Yes.
having to answer all the questions.
So, those that are listening and watching and later, like, please share, please spread the word. I really want to support this lady. She's doing some remarkable work. Um, Her testimonials are just incredible, just incredible. Like I am really privileged and honored to have her agree to be on our show. Like I'm I I'm thrilled. I'm totally thrilled.
Me
Uh,
too.
yeah. So
And,
other than
and,
that,
and support us because we're kicking butt
oh
here.
oh yes, I know. It's a Yeah, it's a win-win, and that's what I love.
Yeah.
I love it's a win-win, and she is such a giving person. Like she's all about service to others, and yeah, we're excited too, Adina. So it's yeah, looking forward to it. Anyways, let you carry on with your day.
Yep. You too. There's no more sunsets, unfortunately. The days are getting longer.
Yeah, and we're not going to change the time just to get your sunset in.
It's like I can't even like pull the shades up anymore because you can't see anything.
Pull the shades up. There's a phrase, eh? Oh, thank you, Fati. It's been wonderful having the conversation again today.
Thank you, Rick.
And
As usual, amazing conversation. See you all next week.
yeah, bye now.